The lesson.
2020. You dropped a single, Captain Shook. Now, I listened to this, 4 or 5 times. And, I haven't heard everything that you've done. I've heard quite a chunk now. Out of everything I heard, that was probably my favorite song so far. And I guess, I like the beat. The video wasn't anything fancy, but it did the job. But it was more just the message, like you're really actually saying, you're saying some shit in there.
Well, that's why I chose to do that clip the way that it's done, because it's more of the message for me. You know what I mean? I didn't care about the visuals, but it's just more about getting them to listen, and not only listen but hear what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, look, I definitely caught on to what you were saying, and hence why I replayed it like a fair few times, because I really wanted to not miss anything. And for the audience who may not have heard the song, in your words, describe what the single Captain Shook's about and why you wrote it.
Well, just going back to what we were talking about before, cultural education, and not so much just cultural education, but also history education. You know what I mean? There are a lot of artists, Aboriginal artists, that, to me, how do I put it? So that song for me was well overdue. I hadn't done any of that sort of stuff before, because in my heart I felt if I was to do something like that, it was, to me, it's playing the victim. It's playing the victim card. Feel sorry for me, poor me, poor me. So my whole mentality was come through the Australian scene and then bring that Indigenous stuff with me as well. You know what I mean? But for me, it was well overdue, because people needed to know. There are a lot of Indigenous Aboriginal artists out there now that still do stuff like that, but it's more aggressive. It's more catered to one fan base. You know what I mean?
Now, because I listened to it a few times, I actually plucked some lines out of it that, I wanted to bring up and then see if we could break down and discuss. Now, in there, you said you brought diseases, you brought guns, you brought alcohol, you brought drugs. Now, first of all, when you use the word you, who exactly are you referring to?
The first settlement, man. I just had to let it be known, because there's always that stereotype, and there's always that profiling on that, especially what I copped, and my family copped, like, he's a junkie, or he's this, he's Aboriginal, he's that, it's like, hang on a minute, we weren't like this. My people didn't know about alcohol. My people, one of the main killers of my people when the settlement happened was diseases, was the flu. You know what I mean? Like, I just had to, I had to let it be known. Like I said, there are other Indigenous artists, but they don't let it be known like that. They're more of a, you say this about me, well, I'm gonna fucking do this to you. You know what I mean? So I had to, hang on, let's educate for a minute. Let's
zone in for a moment on alcohol and alcoholism. From your experience, seeing whether it's friends, family, etc., how severe do you feel is the whole issue of alcoholism within Aboriginal communities?
From what I've seen, it is very damaging. Can be very damaging. My brother, I witnessed it firsthand. My brother was an alcoholic. He'd wake up, have a long neck for breakfast, long neck for lunch, long neck for dinner, and still even to this day, one of my uncles is a very bad alcoholic. If times could be changed, I'd fucking change them. You know what I mean? And like, don't get me wrong, I love the way we're living today, but if I could live in that dream time, I'd fucking love it, man. I'd love it, you know? Yeah, so alcohol it is a touchy subject for me. Also because I was a drinker myself, but I was a fucking cockhead when I got drunk. You know, I lost mates because I was drinking and wanted to fight them, and so it takes a massive toll, especially genetically, where humans we're not built to drink alcohol. You know what I mean? That's the reason why it fucks us up. Like, it's just the way it is. But it's fucked. It's just fucked. Plain old fucked, you know?
And another, another, I guess, stereotype that I would hear when I was younger, more so, is the stereotype that, Aboriginal people sniff petrol to get high. And although that may happen when I was younger and I'm learning, because I'm in a foreign country, I'm just learning for the first time. It was painted to me in a picture as if like all Aboriginal people sniff petrol. Now,
Yeah.
for you personally, why do you think that stereotype has held on so strong? And do you personally, have you personally experienced any family or friends who have succumbed to petrol sniffing?
The reason why I think that still sticks around to this day is because lack of education, lack of cultural education, lack of history, lack of just wanting to learn. You know what I mean? So, like, most multicultural country we have, but it's the most racist. These kids are growing up today racist as all fuck, and they don't even know it. You know what I mean? Like, they'll call me Abo. They don't know it's a racial slur. They just think it's short for Aboriginal because that's what they were taught, With the whole petrol sniffing shit, the first and only person I've ever seen sniff petrol was a guy that was trying to hang around my family, and he was actually Australian. You know what I mean? And he was only young. He would have been, well, he's older than me, but at the time he was only 16, 17. Like, if he couldn't sniff petrol, he was sniffing paint. You know what I mean? Like, so me personally, I haven't seen a blackfella sniff petrol, to be honest. We've all had a bit of petrol in our mouth when we're trying to siphon the car. That's about it, So
Another line that you had in that song was, you celebrate massacre, you're celebrating rape, you celebrate divide, you celebrate our pain. Can you, in a nutshell, explain what the Stolen Generation is, and has it had a direct or indirect impact on you and your family?
So obviously, I want to start off with, I know enough about my culture to know that I don't know nothing. You know what I mean? It's so massive. But to my knowledge, with the whole Stolen Generation stuff, obviously it was to get rid of the black people. That was their way of, trying to breed it out and do this and do that, and to give the young Aboriginal kids white Australia to speak, you know what I mean, so to speak. So there was a lot of pain. My grandfather held a lot of that pain, as his mother was part of the Stolen Generation. Now back in them days, like my grandfather's days, it was unspoken of, because growing up you couldn't speak on that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? For him, so it was very. If they did speak on it, they'd get floggings and whips and shit like that. So there wasn't much spoken around with my family about that. But there is, people probably going to laugh and people going to say it's bullshit, but there is such thing of historical trauma. Personal experience. I watched a movie called Walkabout. It's an Australian movie. The Europeans have a black tracker in chains and stuff like that. They walking through the country trying to find another black fella. They come across small tribes, and the white fellas murder everyone in that tribe, you know. And I went to bed, thought nothing of it. I went to bed. I had 2 nightmares that night. I woke up sweating like this. Has the nightmares was very similar stuff had happened to my children. You know what I mean? So I put that down to historical trauma. So it is massive. But in saying that too, there's also something on the other end of that is something called the lost generation, which was from the Europeans. So I don't know if you've heard of it, but so they were obviously when Australia was discovered, there was low to middle class families in England that were struggling to get by. So the government from there were saying, hey, send your kids over here, help us build. We'll create White Australia. So that's where the White Australia came from. All these kids that come over that were getting money, the parents were getting money for them to come over, them kids never got to go back to their parents. You know what I mean? Like, so as much as we enjoy, like my people endured it, so did some Europeans, you know, and not many people know about the lost generation. You know, the stolen generation's getting out there. People are starting to see and hear it, but not many people know about the lost generation. And that came from my grandfather. And he was a proud black man, you know what I mean? And even he said the same thing, like, not only did we have to go through it, but even some Europeans had to go through it, you know?
The lesson. Oh, yeah.